The Isle of Demons. In 1542, the Lieutenant Governor of New France, Jean-François Roberval, was instructed by the King of France to found settlements along the North Atlantic coast. He brought his niece, Marguerite de Roberval, along for the voyage. But things took a strange turn when his niece began a passionate affair with one of Roberval's officers. Infuriated, the governor left the couple and her maid stranded with some food and firearms on a deserted island. The island was the feared Isle of Demons with a haunting reputation. This mysterious island was named so for the mysterious cries and groans mariners reported hearing through the mist when approaching the island. A 16th century chronicle mentioned that when sailors passed along this coast, they heard in the air, about the tops and the masts of their vessels, human voices making a great din, but there was no form to their speech, only such a murmuring as you might hear in the middle of a public hall on a market day. The island was first mentioned in the map of renowned Dutch artist Johannes Ruijs. In 1498, Ruijs had sailed to Newfoundland with a British convoy. A decade later, in 1508, he was asked to draft a map of the world to be published in a new edition of Ptolemy's Geography. The chart he prepared showed a pair of islands where, according to the inscription on the map, demons had attacked passing ships. Prior to this, in 1424, the Venetian cartographer Giovanni Pizzigano placed an island named Satanazes, meaning devils, in Portuguese, on a chart west of Portugal. It is believed that Pizzigano and Ruijs's islands were the same. The name Satanazes in Pizzigano's map suggests that this island already had a demonic reputation. In 1556, Italian cartographer Giacomo Gastaldi published a detailed map of New France, showing the island near Newfoundland and Labrador, and is shown to be home to bat-winged devils and griffin-like birds. Strangely, though, the Isle of Demons disappeared from maps from mid-17th century onwards, after the island couldn't be found again. The island was never mentioned again. Remarkably, the marooned Frenchwoman Marguerite survived to tell the tale of her experience. After being marooned on the island, she gave birth to a child, but the child died, as did Marguerite's lover and nurse. However, Marguerite survived alone for a year, using her firearms against the beasts. After being rescued by Basque fishermen, she reported that she had been beset by beasts or other shapes abominably and unutterably hideous, the brood of hell, howling in baffled fury. Though Marguerite's story has often been viewed with suspicion, it hasn't stopped enthusiasts from attempting to locate the island. One theory identifies the place as Fichot Island, at the northern tip of Newfoundland. This island, according to sources, is home to a breeding colony of gannets, a type of seabird whose guttural cries, while breeding, may have been taken for the sounds of demons. Another theory is that Marguerite was left at Harrington Harbor, located in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. According to a local legend, Marguerite found shelter in a small rocky cave at Harrington Harbor. Today the cave is known as Marguerite's Cave. Residents at Harrington Harbor claim that the spirits of the couple often roam around the island. But if you thought stories of demon-inhabited islands existed only in European traditions, consider this excerpt from an Arabic tradition regarding the throne of Iblises, the chief of devils who rebelled against Allah. It is said that the throne of Iblis, near the Sea of Darkness, is borne by a horde of demons and evil spirits who are employed in this task, encircled by evil jinn who are at his command. These veil him and never leave him. Others disperse at his command. Iblis's prison is on the island of Sa. It is there that he is imprisoned along with the jinn and satans who follow him. Could this be Isle of Demons? Antillia. Also known as the Isle of Seven Cities, Antillia was a 15th century cartographic phenomenon said to lie far west of Spain and Portugal. In his 1492 Nuremberg Globe, Martin Behaim recounts the story of its foundation. In the year 734 after the birth of Christ, when all Spain was overrun by the miscreants of Africa, this island of Antillia, called also the Isle of the Seven Cities, was inhabited by the Archbishop of Porto with 6 other bishops and certain companions who fled from Spain with their cattle and property. Once there, the 7 bishops each reportedly created a settlement. They even burned their ships to never take flight from this new land. History then goes quiet on this fabled land until it resurfaces in the 15th century chronicles. According to Martin Behaim, in the year 1414, a Spanish ship approached this island for the first time and made it known to Europe. From then on, Antillia started appearing on almost all maps of the world as interest in this newly discovered island grew. Antillia made its first appearance in the 1424 map of Venetian cartographer Juan Pizzigano, lying far in the Atlantic Ocean. Thereafter, it features in more than 20 maps in the next 70-odd years as contact stories between the two worlds become frequent. Strangely enough, all deliberate attempts to find the island remained fruitless. Unplanned contact, however, was reported multiple times. Ferdinand Columbus reports of an alleged encounter with the islanders by a Portuguese ship in the time of Henry the Navigator, around 1430s. Antonio Galvão reports that a 1447 Portuguese ship stumbled on the island after getting lost in a storm and met its inhabitants, who reported they had fled there in the time of Roderick and asked whether the Moors still dominated Hispania. These reports led to a newfound confidence in the reality of this island, as it finds a mention in a letter from King Afonso V of Portugal, dated 1475, which grants the 7 cities and any other populated islands in the western Atlantic Ocean to Knight Fernão Teles. In response, Spain claimed the island to itself. Even more mystifying were reports of this island disappearing upon discovery. The writings of Manuel de Faria e Sousa quote Sacaru, governor of Merida, stating an island can be seen from Madeira, but when sailors wish to reach it, it disappears. Lending credence to this story were Arabic sources, with the Akhbar al-Zaman mentioning in the Great Sea, there is an island which is visible at some distance in the sea. However, should one attempt to approach it, it moves away and vanishes. Later, the same source reports that sailors mention a fish called chakil, the carrying of which enables mariners to break the enchantment and land on the island. Capturing the imagination of Europeans further were reports of gold and silver in the island's sands. Galvão's account of the 1447, which lists the first known contact of Portuguese with the island, also reports, "The boatswain of the ship brought home a little of the sand and sold it to a goldsmith of Lisbon, out of which he had a good quantity of gold." But as the North Atlantic became a more popular sailing route after 1492, and also due to the failure to locate it, the island began disappearing from newer maps. The last mention of Antillia is in the 1508 map of Johannes Ruysch, where he relates the story of the island. This island, Antillia, was once found by the Portuguese, but now when it is searched, cannot be found. Today, no one knows the location of the island, and speculations range from Iceland and the southwestern USA to Cuba. The Isle of Seven Cities is one of those fabled islands which was forgotten sooner than many other mythical islands. But its importance during the 15th century can be gauged by the fact that Spain and Portugal once squabbled over this island, despite its apparent non-existence. Hy Brasil. An old legend, dating back to at least 1325, describes an island off the west coast of Ireland called Hy Brasil. Like Atlantis, the island has been impossible to locate. Unlike Atlantis, there are some fairly recent accounts of such an island by experienced explorers, plus nautical charts over hundreds of years showing Hy Brasil's purported location. According to Celtic folklore, Hy Brasil was said to be a place of perfect contentment and immortality. It was also the domain of Brisel, the High King of the world, who held court there every 7 years. Brisel had the ability to make the island rise or sink as he pleased, and normally only let the island be visible when his court was in full swing. The first map depicting Hy Brasil was created in 1325. But the intriguing thing about subsequent maps was how they couldn't agree on a location. The island moved around the coast of Ireland somewhat erratically over the centuries, once even popping up just off the coast of North America. Accounts of the island are stranger still, ranging from sightings of an island shrouded by mist to tales of an island kingdom inhabited by ancient people. Expeditions left Bristol in 1480 and 1481 to search for it, and a letter written shortly after the return of John Cabot from his expedition in 1497 reports that land found by Cabot had been discovered in the past by the men from Bristol who found Hy Brasil. Over the following centuries, expeditions set out to find the island, most ending in failure while some claiming success. Of these supposed successful sightings, one man named Captain Rich claims to have come so near that he discovered a harbor, at which point he began to sail towards it. Captain Rich continued to sail at the island as a mist came in, but was never able to make it to shore. It ends with the conclusion that maybe those famous enchanters now inhabit there, and by their magic skill conceal their island from foreigners. Another account, a letter sent by a man in Derry to a friend in England, describes the voyage of one Captain John Nisbet in 1674. who found himself and his crew stranded on High Brazil and went out to explore. On the first day, they found the uninhabited island to contain an old castle. But the next day they woke up and saw a very ancient gentleman and 10 men following him. The old man begins to tell the crew that the island was called O Brazil and that he, along with others, were trapped in the castle by Negromancer. But with the sailors' visit, the curse was lifted, and now others would also be able to see the island. Needless to say, it didn't pan out. The last documented sighting of High Brazil was in 1872, when author T.J. Westrop and several companions saw the island appear and then vanish. This was Mr. Westrop's third view of High Brazil, but on this voyage, he had brought his mother and some friends to verify the island's existence. Today, scholars think Brazil may have been a reference to Baffin Island, or to now sunken lands visible only when sea levels were lower during the last ice age. Or, to everyone's dismay, an optical illusion produced by layers of hot and cold air, refracting light rays. St. Brendan's Island. According to the Latin text from the 9th century, St. Brendan of Ireland and his followers set out in search for a promised land in the 6th century in the Atlantic. During their voyage, they landed on several islands, and even a large whale mistaking it for an island. Finally, after traveling for several years, they found the promised land. They stayed on the island for 40 days and gathered gemstones and fruit before they began their journey home to Ireland. The monk Burino, who wrote the Latin text of St. Brendan's voyage 300 years later, claimed to have visited this same island. Burino described it as being a thickly wooded, mountainous island where the sun never set. Thereafter, the island made its way into the European imagination and records. Starting from the 13th century till 18th century, it made its way into numerous maps of the world, but it was never found. More intriguing, however, were the stories of mysterious interaction of explorers with the mystical island. Many ancient explorers set out to find it, and some even claimed to have spotted it and claimed that it would vanish before anyone could reach it. The Portuguese writer Luís Perdigão recorded the interest of the King of Portugal after a sea captain informed Henry the Navigator, 1394-1460, that he had found the island but was driven off by tumultuous sea conditions. Henry ordered him back. He sailed off, but never returned. In 1759, a Franciscan friar stated that he saw the island on the 3rd of May at 6 in the morning and was ready to swear to it on oath. Upon seeing it, he called for another priest who had seen it twice prior to this. As he started looking at it, the island started getting obscured by clouds. He says the island was visible thereafter for another 90 minutes, and then it disappeared under heavy rain. This spectacle was viewed by 40 people. José de Vieira y Clavijo wrote in Noticias in 1772 of a fleet of Canary Islands, while returning from the Americas, claimed to have the island appear in front of them, but didn't reach it. In 1719, a Scottish monk reported seeing the island, as did the mayor of Valverde, El Hierro, in 1721. As a result of these sightings, a new commission of inquiry under Gaspar Dominguez was sent, but no fresh evidence was uncovered. According to the Canary historian Ramirez, in 1723, a priest performed the rite of exorcism towards the island during one of its apparitions behind a low cloud. This was witnessed by a large number of persons and sworn to an affidavit. Thereafter, the island fell out of favor of explorers as it remained elusive. But in the middle of the 20th century, the islands burst onto the scene once again. On the 10th of August 1958, a man named Manuel Quintero claimed to take what appeared to be the first photograph of the ghost island. The images showed what appeared to be a layer of mist on the sea surface, so the supposed sightings were largely dismissed as fata morgana, a mirage that occurs when there are different layers of air with different densities, usually in a situation of thermal inversion, causing the refraction of light rays. The frenzy of a promised land triggered by a 9th century monk Burino still captures the imagination of many people. But was it simply a piece of Burino's imagination, or was it just a mirage? Or maybe a glimpse of an alternate reality visible to a few, but never in reach? Bermeja Island. Until recently, the island of Bermeja was in the Gulf of Mexico, 200 kilometers off the northwest coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. Its exact geographical coordinates were 22 degrees 33 minutes north latitude and 91 degrees 22 minutes west longitude. It is here that the island of Bermeja has been depicted by cartographers since the 16th century. It was first shown on a Portuguese map of 1535. It is also reported in the map of Alonso de Santa Cruz in 1539 under the name Yucatan and the adjacent islands. There is also a description of the island of Bermeja in the book of Alonso de Chavez's Mirror of Navigation from the year 1540. The island of Bermeja also exists on the map of Sebastian Cabot, printed in 1544 in Antwerp. During the entire 17th and 18th century, the image of Bermeja did not undergo any changes. Even the map by Henry S. Tanner shows Bermeja Island off the coast in the Gulf of Mexico as late as 1846. Its existence never in doubt. But come 1997, and the Mexican and U.S. governments are negotiating a treaty to divide Hoyos de Dona, a stretch of international waters consisting of the area where Bermeja is located. International law allows countries to claim 200 nautical miles of ocean off their territories, known as the country's exclusive economic zone. At the time of negotiations, Mexico's Alacranes Islands are the furthest land points that extend into the Gulf of Mexico. The existence of Bermeja Island would net Mexico about 15% more territory in an oil-rich area. The existence of the island would be an important extension for the maritime boundary of Mexico and would play a big role in protecting Mexican interests in drilling agreements with the United States. The Mexican government, thus, send out an expedition to study it to secure commercial advantage it accords them. But to everyone's absolute horror, the Spanish research vessel finds no trace of this 80 square km worth of huge piece of land. The island that has existed since the last 5 centuries is suddenly nowhere to be found. With the authorized period of delays on exploration set to expire in 2010, Mexican authorities hunt for it once more in 2009. 3 official investigations take place. All 3 use the most sophisticated technologies at their disposal. Bermeja, again, is nowhere to be found. How could a huge piece of land mapped, apparently as recently as 1941, just be wiped off the face of the planet? A strange set of questions confronts Mexican authorities. Is it time to admit this island never existed? Or maybe it was invented by cartographers to deter rivals. Countries making maps in the 16th and 17th centuries published them with deliberate inaccuracies to prevent their enemies from using them. A strategically placed fake island could easily deter an enemy, but numerous sailors who saw it over the centuries all described the island's reddish or blondish coloration. Similarities of its accounts and its existence in maps well beyond the 1800s make its phantom status doubtful. So if it did disappear, what caused it? Some hypothesize that natural erosion caused the island to disappear. Others suggest it was a casualty of global warming and rising sea levels. Another theory dictates that an underwater earthquake shook it clean off the radar. All possible theories. But there was another theory that gained the most traction. As per this theory, the CIA blew it up, with a view to expanding U.S. sovereignty in the oil-rich Gulf and denying Mexico the advantage. Probable, maybe not. Possible. Given the CIA's ruthless reputation, nothing can be ruled out. A phantom island, a maritime has-been, or an innocent victim of political power interests? The truth about Bermeja is still out there. Were these mystical lands just a figment of people's imagination? Were they simply mirages? Or was there something more supernatural at play? No one knows. For many people, though, the debate about the physical existence of these islands is immaterial. For if they have existed in the imagination of people for so long, they are real. And if you liked our story, please subscribe and hit the notification button if you haven't done so already.